The gaslighting was thermonuclear level. I mean, the gaslighting was like the scene in Game of Thrones where they light the whole ocean on fire with the wildfire or something. I mean, they were gaslighting everywhere over the issue of crime and defund the police. Oh, now we're going to play this game where Joe Biden's Mr. Law Enforcement. Why? Because people are going to vote soon and they realize that being bludgeoned in front of their homes in cities where they've, in many cases, paid far too much money to be there is something people don't like. And talking about social justice and the racist system of police doesn't actually change voters' minds when it comes to, I just want safe streets. I had the misfortune. It is my job, Clay. So I'll take one for the team. I just will do it. The misfortune of watching the Joe Biden speech yesterday.
You watched the whole thing?
I watched the whole thing.
How long did he talk?
Well, I mean, it was like 30, 40 minutes, I think.
You watched it on tape delay, which is even worse.
Oh, no, I watched it on YouTube. Yeah. So I watched it, but I watched the whole thing.
Well, good for you.
And wow, I was hoping that it wouldn't be quite as brutal in terms of dishonesty. And first of all, somebody has to tell Joe Biden he's not allowed to make a joke and then immediately go, not a joke, because that's really weird,
Yeah.
You can't be like, knock, knock, who's there? Have your answer and then say, not a joke or not hyperbole. It is actually a joke, you idiot. So start with that. There were so many things. The gaslighting was thermonuclear level. I mean, the gaslighting was like the scene in Game of Thrones where they light the whole ocean on fire with the wildfire or something. I mean, they were gaslighting everywhere over the issue of crime and defund the police. Oh, now we're going to play this game where Joe Biden's Mr. Law Enforcement. Why? Because people are going to vote soon and they realize that being bludgeoned in front of their homes in cities where they've, in many cases, paid far too much money to be there is something people don't like. And talking about social justice and the racist system of police doesn't actually change voters' minds when it comes to, I just want safe streets. But the real moment here, I don't know if there's a dumber argument that is made, Clay, about the Second Amendment than the, what are you going to do with just your stupid rifles? It's a very stupid argument. Joe Biden is not a smart man, and he decided to make that argument.
And for those brave right-wing Americans who say it's all about keeping America's independent and safe, if you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun. No, I'm not joking.
First, Clay, he has neither read nor understood the Constitution or the history of his own presidency, apparently. See Afghanistan.
Not only Afghanistan, what was the first thing they did in Ukraine when Russia invaded?
Sent them guns.
Before they got all of the material, billions of dollars being spent by us, they passed out guns. They passed out guns to anybody who would take them all over the country of Ukraine and forbade men from leaving the country and told them, hey, take this gun and go defend your country. And am I wrong, or have we still not given any fighter jets to Ukraine? Ukraine is fighting against Russia without, to my knowledge, Buck, a single outside of Ukraine
guns, artillery pieces, shoulder-fired missiles, but we have not given them, formally at least, fighter planes.
I don't think they've even gotten in. So this whole argument, plus the flip side to this is, if you're going to fight against the government, I will rain down bombs on you with my F-15s. That is exactly why people want guns, right? And so this whole argument, Biden ran, Buck, as a uniter, a guy who was going to restore normalcy to the White House. And every time he opens his mouth, he creates more division. And I don't know whether he himself is even cognitively aware enough of what the larger world was. I mean, I saw the clip. I haven't even checked to make sure that we have it, but at some point we should play it, where he tried to allege that there were a bunch of police that were killed on January 6th in his sort of harebrained analogy associated with January 6th. He said, imagine if you saw a parliament stormed or something like that. I think we have
got
this
it.
audio.
Play it, yeah.
Police lost their lives as a result of that day. Police lost their lives. One of the officers said it was worse than anything he had experienced in war in Iraq. So let me say this to my MAGA Republican friends in Congress. Don't tell me you support law enforcement if you won't condemn what happened on the 6th. Don't tell me. Can't do it. For God's sake, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Look, you're either on the side of a mob or the side of the police. You can't be pro-law enforcement and pro-insurrection. You can't be a party of law and order and call the people who attacked the police on January 6th patriots. You can't do it.
No one says any of that, first of all. Certainly no one on this show. We've said from the moment, Buck, both you and I have, nobody should riot. I understand everybody has strong political opinions. I don't care what your political opinions are. No one should riot. No one should trespass. No one should break the law. You and I have been saying this about BLM for a long time. But, Buck, you were in, I know Afghanistan.
Iraq and Afghanistan. I was
Iraq and Afghanistan. Is there any possible way that anyone could say January 6th was worse than anything that they saw in Iraq?
I mean, I remember seeing guys from a special forces team who had just taken down an HVT, and they were brought back to a military base because they had to get emergency surgery because of all the ball bearings they were hit with from the suicide vest. A lot worse than the people taking selfies. I got to tell you.
I can't even conceive of how somebody could make that analogy unless they worked in a mess hall or something in Iraq and never left the base. I mean, that is an outlandish and absurd analogy, assuming that it was even said.
The Churchill phrase was that he was a pyromaniac in a field of straw men. That was Joe Biden in this speech yesterday in Pennsylvania, by the way, which we all know. People in Pennsylvania, what are they really caring about? We've looked at the polling, right? We looked at where the issues are, Pennsylvania and nationally. The economy, inflation, election integrity issues, which was interesting in a recent poll that Clay and I were sharing back and forth. Gun violence, which we will talk about in 1 second here. And I think immigration didn't make it. I'm trying to remember what was the fifth one again. The fifth one was a surprise to me. But anyway, that's what they care about. And I think the immigration issue is going to surge more and more. I think also the media doesn't talk about it very much because it is such a gaping hole in the Biden narrative. What are they going to tell everybody? We have an open border and we want amnesty? That's what they want, but they don't want people to know that. Clay, Biden is supposed to be a uniter. All he does is lie about his opponents and harangue them. Who's going around saying that January 6th, that the riot on January 6th was fine? Nobody says it was fine on the right. I mean, nobody of any standing or having any support. So why do we have to sit around? How many times has Joe Biden said that the BLM riots of 2020 created duress during an election year where people might have even felt unsafe voting for a Republican? Yeah. The businesses that boarded up certainly didn't feel safe if Donald Trump had won again. How many times has Biden said, I'm sorry about what happened when my voters, my supporters, burned down a police precinct in Minneapolis or burned down drugstores? What about all the looting that happened? The looting that happened in Herald Square in New York City, just a few minutes from where I live. What about the broken windows and the looting that occurred on my block by people who were Biden voters who felt empowered by his rhetoric and the rhetoric of his party to act in that way, to pursue anarchy, destruction, and mob violence on the streets? Has he ever condemned that? Have they ever condemned that? Of course not.
What about the fact that they paid for those people to get out of jail? I mean,
Kamala was raising money for them.
I know. That story alone is maybe the most underplayed story associated with the summer of riots that we had in 2020. And Buck, what everybody out there should prepare for is this is going to happen again in 2024 because every election cycle happened in 16, happened in 20. It's going to happen in 2024. They have to mobilize. There will be some police action. I don't know what it'll be. That will be questionable, and there will be protests that begin around it. There will be massive support for those protests, and we will have, I'm predicting it right now, just like we saw in 16, just like we saw in 20, in 2024, BLM will get active again. You know how BLM just disappears? It's hibernates for a few years, and then as soon as it gets to be presidential election time, there is it's like everybody starts yelling and clapping their hands and saying, hey, it's time for the protests to start up again, to try to drive up their base, to intimidate and scare Republicans from even being able to talk about crime, because Republicans, so many of them are so terrified of being called racist if you question it at all. And it's coming in 24, no matter who the nominees are.
As a matter of statistics and fact, there are thousands and thousands of families across the country that have mourned the death of an innocent loved one whose life was taken in excess of the usual numbers that we see of violence year in and year out, right? We talk about excess deaths when it comes to COVID. Yep. There are excess deaths in the sense of exceeding previous year expectations for cities and nationwide. The surge in violence that has occurred on Democrats' watch is because of Democrat policies and because of decisions that they made, because they are just racked with white guilt, because they are obsessed with social justice, because they live, people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, in fancy neighborhoods and have lots of security. They don't care about what actually happens in major cities and even now small cities and towns across the country when it comes to crime. As long as it benefits their power, they were willing to pander, and people paid the price. The Soros-backed prosecutors, the defund police movement, letting out criminals who've been arrested 20, 50, 100 times. The only people who do that stuff, and have done it for years now, are Democrats. There is no this is not a both sides issue. This is not a, hey, why did things get so much more dangerous? Wow, we can't figure. Remember, Clay, they were claiming it was COVID. All of the people right now are saying, oh, Republicans, because of January 6th, don't care about police. They were all saying the surge in violence was because of COVID. And as we know, it just keeps going and going and continuing because they changed the structures of the criminal justice system to suit the Bryn Mawr faculty lounge approach to how to deal with criminality on our streets. And so we've all suffered the consequences. I mean, here as a New Yorker, we've certainly seen it. All across the country, we've seen it. And now they're going to play the, oh, Democrats, Joe Biden's doing this whole, I'm Scranton Joe with the rolled up sleeve, you know, got a lunch pail in my hands. You know, it's such bull crap, and we can all see it.
They put defund the police. That clip is out there. We should probably just put it up on clayandbuck.com. 7 minutes of every prominent Democrat that you can basically think of saying that they definitely want to defund the police, because Democrats are now trying to claim, we never said defund the police. No. You all said defund the police. You wrote it on the streets where the protests were taking place.
So we've been talking about defunding the police.
There's some issues that we ask police to do, like mental health issues or policing in schools and all the rest, that perhaps we can shuffle some of that money around.
Suck it up. Defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police.
Mayor Eric Garcetti saying, take some of the money from policing, about $150 million.
I applaud Eric Garcetti for doing what he's done.
Not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
So yes, defund your butts. Defund you.
Yes, I support the reallocation of resources from NYPD.
We will be moving funding from the NYPD to youth initiatives and social services.
They are talking about reducing the allocation of resources to that department. And I think every single city in this country ought to be thinking about the same thing.
Yes, I support the defund movement. I'm for responsible reallocation of resources.
And defund the police.
I think you do all those other things, you don't need all the money that's going to the police department. So yeah, I mean, the spirit of it, I do support that.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of us were asked if we could imagine a future without police back in 2017 when we were running for office. And I answered yes to that question.
We are going to reduce funding in the police department and redirect that money.
There's no reason the police budget should just keep growing and growing and growing. They can make sensible cuts to policing.
We propose
to redirect over $7 million from the Police Bureau.
That our city, through our city administrative officer, identified $250 million in cuts.
Rashida Tlaib tweeting, "No more policing, incarceration, and militarization. It can't be reformed."
When they're saying defund the police, what are they saying? They're saying we want fundamental, basic change when it comes to policing. And they're right.
We are reallocating funds. The police department here in Minneapolis needs to be dismantled, and we need to start anew.
In some necessary cases, completely dismantling those police forces.
Police departments are taking a sizable amount of the budget of a lot of municipalities and other entities. We need to look at those budgets, pull some of the money back, and invest it in other things.
We are committed to shifting resources.
Our calls to defund the police have been met with resistance.
To stop investing so much money in this militarized police force and instead invest in the things that our community really needs.
Yes, I support a radical reimagining of community safety and public safety.
I do believe that we need to reallocate resources away.
And will this involve cuts? Yes, of course, to every department, including the police department.
And so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer.
When we said defund the police, the world woke up.
I really love that Black Lives Matters and other protesters have put this front and center to defund.
Defunding police means defunding police. If these reports are accurate, then these proposed cuts to the NYPD budget are a disingenuous illusion. This is not a victory. The freshman Democrat adding, the fight to defund policing will continue.
We are going to reimagine policing in New York City.
I think the idea of having a police-free future is very aspirational. And I am willing to stand with community members who are asking us to think of that as the goal.
Should be defunding or dismantling their police departments, such as in Minneapolis and New York.
My answer is yes to that. We need to be looking at it clearly.
Which means reallocating and not further investing in a carceral state.
Going through a process of dismantling that institution.
So defunding the police, for me, it means a reallocation of funds.
Why use the word defund? Why use the word defund? And it's like, this is the word that's coming from the streets, you know?
We're going to dissolve the gun violence reduction team, the school resource officer program, and the transit specialty units. You don't have one bad apple. You don't have four bad apples. You have a system-wide problem in that police department. And only by completely dismantling that system and rebuilding it intentionally with the community members at the table, do you have any hope of getting it right?
Coming together as a community to reimagine what public safety looks like for us.
We talk about defunding the police, defunding the Pentagon.
My push is that we defund our police departments.
This idea of reprioritizing our budget, this idea of moving funds and reinvesting.
It means that we need to look at ways in which we can reduce the amount of resources that we're providing to the department, redirect those funds.
To make sure that that defund is first understood and that we bring that home to our communities.
So Minneapolis unanimously just voted on a resolution that will engage the community on a one-year process of what happens as we go through the process of dismantling the department and starting anew.
And what we committed to was a community process to help reimagine public safety.
The city council in Minneapolis made the right decision.
So when we talk about defunding, it can show up in multiple ways.
We obviously took money out of the NYPD budget, put it into youth programs, put it into social services, put it into recreation centers for young people. That's really the right direction. I'm glad we did that.
Not only do we need to defund, but we need to dismantle and start anew. Allows us to really reimagine what public safety should look like in our community.
It means a dramatic reduction in the number of police in our poor communities, and particularly our poor Black and brown communities.
I'm asking you to ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice to make sure that overfunded police departments are defunded.
Our commitment is to end our city's toxic relationship with the Minneapolis Police Department, to end policing as we know it.
And so what we are advocating for is a reorientation, reimagining of what public safety should be.
Biden continues to spread lies about January 6th. And I would say one of the most common lies about January 6th is that police officers were killed there. This is right up there with Charlottesville. And Donald Trump called the Nazis very fine people, which is a total lie. But it is so embedded in our discourse now that many people believe a fundamental untruth.
Joe Biden's campaign was built on a lie. He said that he
100%.
ran because of the Charlottesville
that.
very fine people comment. This was his whole story, which is just a lie.
Total lie. And this is continuing to propagate the lie. This is Biden yesterday talking about January 6th. Listen.
Imagine, Joe, if you turned on the television in Washington, D.C., and saw a mob of 1,000 people storming down the hallways of the parliament, breaking down the doors, trying to overturn an outcome of election, and killing several police officers in the meantime. Imagine what you'd think.
Okay, it's a lie. And I don't know where all these supposed fact checkers are, but every time Donald Trump opened his mouth, there were 50 different people fact-checking every single sentence he put out there, falsely claiming that police officers were killed on January 6th is a big lie. That's a significant lie. It's not
there
just
were two cops,
a small, misspeak.
Yeah, there were two police officers who committed suicide after the January 6th. Now, we don't know if they were suffering from depression before. All we know is there were two police officers who committed suicide. But because they were there on January 6th, we're told that that's why it happened. That's essentially the button. And then there was Officer Sicknick, who we were initially told was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. Yes. Total lie. Nobody did that. That did not happen. It did not occur. He died of a stroke the next day. Now, that's very sad, and it's very sad those other officers took their own lives, but they were not murdered by an angry mob of protesters. That is a lie. The facts should matter here.
Yes, 100%. The only person who died was Ashley
and
Babbitt.
they're not listed as line of duty deaths, by the way, by the police, Capitol Hill Police. They are not listed as line of duty deaths,
which is super consequential. And so I will say this: every time Biden opened his mouth, Republicans benefit.